It's my deep pleasure this morning to introduce our speakers. Kaye and Larry Sturgis, a dynamic duo, a sacred relationship, a couple of somethings. And I met them many years ago and feel myself, I want to let you both know, I feel privileged to be on the earth at the same time that you are. And that you are fellow sojourners and students and teachers. Many people in this room know Kaye and Larry, but probably many do not. So I'm only going to tell you a little bit of what they do. Kaye is an astrologer. That's one thing she does. Larry does web design. That's one thing he does. And my own children had a numerical expression they used to use when they were little. It was 11 million. And so I would have to have this big scroll to read the 11 million things that Kaye and Larry do or think or come up with. One thing I do know is they inspire people with giving from the heart and sharing of their wisdom and their wit. Both of you create joyous laughter in me and a desire to frolic in creation and celebrate life. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure many others who are fortunate enough to spend time with you. And I know that today they're going to really share an inspired message about sacred relationships. And we all look forward to it, and let's give them a warm welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. Susan, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Before we get started about our talk today, I want to share a little story about the fellowship. Because whenever we were planning this, Kaye said to me that try to be sure that you come from your heart whenever and connect with everybody in the audience. So
Wives.
She was very wise. So
I said wives.
Wives?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll connect with all the wives out there. Thank you. Well, when Susan was giving her introduction and mentioned that she'd known us for a while, well, she was one of the people that we met when I first came to the fellowship, and she was very sweet then and continues to be to this day. And when we first came in, I was listening to everyone sing this ancient Christian hymn, and I was immediately brought back to the 1950s and being in my grandmother's church. And so with that, I just smiled politely and just sat there. And then a few minutes later, Chris Van Cleef, which I believe everyone knows, he came up and he grabbed his guitar and he stood here and he sang in that beautiful voice, and he said these words: "Prepare ye the way of the Lord." All right. And then everybody in the congregation joined in and started to sing. Well, instantly, my throat clogged up, choked up. I got tears in my eyes, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had never had an experience like that, especially being in church. And I cried, but I found that these tears were tears of joy. And so I wanted to thank all of the people at the fellowship for all of their years of service and for all the time that we sing, and including today. As soon as the singing started today, tears welled up in my eyes, so I was hoping I'd be able to get through this without too much, and I think Kaye brought some Kleenex, but we'll see. It's not a sad talk. It's not a sad talk. So, our talk today is on spiritually transformative relationships. And this is something that Kaye and I find near and dear to our hearts. And we will define these relationships It's relationships that provide the opportunities and the experiences for which we can grow and transform spiritually. And that makes sense. Now, I'm sure that all of you have figured out that all relationships have the potential to be spiritually transformative. Although sometimes we don't always recognize the opportunity for growth when it appears. And often it takes a bit of pain to get our attention. But if we apply a spiritual perspective to the events that we encounter, we stand a much better chance of making sense of them. However, if we truly want to see ourselves as the divine beings that we really and truly are, it helps to have a close and loving relationship. And this gives us a distinct advantage in life. As a matter of fact, Kaye and I think that it's absolutely necessary. Now, we all know that all relationships aren't happiness and light all the time, but that usually stems from a personal challenge. Closer. Thank you. Oh, okay, I'll get closer. Oh, good. Oh, thanks. Okay, so we know that these challenges that we have in relationships usually stem from a personal challenge. And so my happiness, or lack thereof, is usually a product of something that's going on inside me, and it's definitely not my partner. And I want to quote something that Paul Solomon said back in 1982. And he said, "The most important relationships in our life, in your life, is the relationship with yourself. Because all other relationships are built on that relationship, including your relationship with God." I think that our relationships are probably the single most important factor in our lives, and they determine much in part our happiness, our work, and of course, marriage. Now, Edgar Casey also agreed, and he said, "There first must be the quiet or harmony in one's own self, if one would find harmony with the association of others." I think it's important to say here that Kaye and I were on spiritual paths and seeking inner peace long before we met. And we've worked diligently over the years to apply what we've learned. And even though we both know that divine intervention brought us together and gave us the opportunity, we also know that our relationship didn't happen by accident. And it happened on purpose and with focused intention. Now, in keeping with the VBIN's format where speakers get up and share their personal stories like we did yesterday, well, that was great. Kaye and I are going to approach this subject by sharing some of our relationship stories with you. So we hope that you can find some value in our talk. Okay? She's going to share how we met.
Thank you, Larry. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here, and I'm really glad you're here, too. In 1988, just before I met Larry, a friend of mine who is also a metaphysician used to exchange card readings with me. I'll give you his name because a lot of you know him. It was Stephen Pucklin. He's a member here, and he lives with his lovely wife in Europe right now. Anyway, he told me I was going to meet the man of my dreams on an upcoming trip I was taking. My friend Stephen went on, telling me the man would have blue eyes and blonde hair, and said this man would be the love of my life, and that he would be compatible with me on every level that I could possibly dream of, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I laughed. I said, "No way, this doesn't exist." I was 38. I was still thinking a little bit that maybe I knew more than I really know. I didn't have a good track record when it came to having long-term relationships at that time either. In fact, I'd recently spent a good amount of time determined to ferret out exactly what I desired in a mate and then dedicated myself to becoming what I wanted. Mostly it seemed to boil down to a number of qualities that I wanted in a loving relationship. I felt embarrassed to realize that a lot of things I desired I wasn't quite measuring up to myself. I intended to change that, and working my plan, I set out happily down the path on the way to becoming my own soulmate, and off I went to Texas. Oh, just to digress for a moment here, a year before I'd taken my son Rick to one of Tony Robbins' Mind Revolution seminars, where we learned the fundamentals of NLP, and firewalked in New York, when the results not only helped me understand myself and others better, but also helped my son, who was struggling in school, go to straight A's, and a shining example of a student, I was sold on the program. I signed up for a 3-week-long Anthony Robbins NLP certification in Austin, Texas. Once I got to Texas, I saw there were over 500 people from all over the world at the seminar. I spent 3 weeks in Austin doing things I never thought of doing, very wild and crazy for someone like me. I went skydiving from 12,000 feet. Blindfolded, I climbed a 50-foot pole and once there, leapt onto a trapeze 8 feet away. I braved a world record firewalk and broke old patterns of behavior and set up some new ones on all levels, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. All the while learning how to better commune with myself and others. It was definitely an intensive. On the night after the seminar was over, I was exhausted and preparing for bed. I thought about Stephen's reading. We had exchanged many readings, and never had he told me I would meet someone, but now he had. And what he had said had not happened, but no one is correct all the time. Can you imagine a psychic who's correct all the time? There would be throngs of people at their doorstep for hundreds of miles down the road. So no one's right all the time. For me, it was just a confirmation that I was on the right track with becoming my own soulmate. Just about then, the hotel's loudly ringing phone snapped me out of my reverie. It was late at night, and I had no clue as to who it could be. It was Doug on the phone, a fellow trainer from the seminar, and he wanted to know if I wanted to go over to the spa pool at the staff's hotel. We were invited, and did I want to join him? I said thanks, but no thanks, that I really had a super early flight the next morning. I had to get up at 5 and hung up the phone. As I walked away from the phone, my intuitive voice, the one I always listen to, or none of this would have happened and I wouldn't be here talking with you about it today, said, "Kaye, call him back. You can sleep on the plane tomorrow." I reluctantly called him back, and minutes later, Doug and I are downstairs in the lobby waiting for the hotel van to take us to the staff member's hotel. Once we arrived, we went around to the hot tub and stepped into the water. Some of the staff was already there. The thing was huge, maybe 15 or 20 feet in diameter. It's the biggest hot tub I've ever seen. But after all, we were in Texas. I settled back in a quiet area of the tub against the wall with my eyes closed, enveloped in a relaxed peace of mind. 3 weeks of stress just pouring off my body. The warm water bubbled and swirled around my neck and head and dulled the sounds of other people talking until a very smooth male voice spoke close to my ear. "And where have you been this past 3 weeks?" I was just like, oh. I turned ready to blow off this guy who had entered my sacred space. Like, instead, something quite contrary happened. I opened my eyes to see a blonde-haired, blue-eyed man I'd seen a couple of times in the seminar. I felt like I knew him instantly, as if we were deeply connected somehow. And amazing myself in this kind of situation, completely relaxed. He said his name was Larry. Then we began talking, and it was pretty obvious something magical was unfolding. I was thinking, who is this guy? I feel like I know him. It didn't take long for us two soulmates to catch up on our current lives with each other. We had so much in common on everything from metaphysics to our view of life here on Earth, from our families to favorite authors to being born the same year, a month apart. We were both in 8th grade history class when President Kennedy was shot. We both had been married 3 times each. Yeah, great track record. For about the same length of time each. For each of our marriages. And one of each of our exes had passed away. We both had 2 children, an older boy and a younger girl. We loved the same music, had a casual approach to life in general, lived 5 blocks from the ocean, me here and him in San Diego. It was crazy. It was crazy. But one thing was clear. After 3 hours of literally pruning ourselves in the hot tub, we realized it was time to go. We also saw that we were the only ones left in the spa, and that a huge thunder and lightning storm was crackling all around us. I mean, no kidding. Lightning and we hadn't even noticed, so taken by each other were we. Fortunately, our guardian angels were looking out for us, and we avoided electrocution. We got out of the hot tub, went and found Doug, and Larry went to his room, and Doug and I went back to our hotel. The next morning, I realized that I had met someone very special indeed, and realized I didn't even know his last name. When I returned home, a close friend heartily recommended that I call Robbins Research Institute and find out who this Larry was. I did, and so it began. We talked by phone and soon began to travel to visit each other as often as we were able. Larry?
So soon. I'm glad you guys are patient. Okay, the first time that I came to see Kaye here in Virginia, I had recently, a couple of weeks before, taken a seminar called A Date with Destiny. And this seminar was probably the most important or the most influential event that I'd ever attended. And it affected how that I was going to approach relationships from that time on. And because this affected me in such a way, it was such a life-changing event that I really wanted to share this with Kaye. We were having such a great time together and really exploring our relationship. And so I wanted to share this with her, but I didn't just want to tell her about it. I wanted to show it to her so that she could really get in and experience the full effect that I've been able to do during the seminar. But even though I knew that this process that I was getting ready to share with her would probably change her life as well, I had another reason. I had a little ulterior motive. My Scorpio was out there. Of course, I didn't tell her what my motivations were. But anyway, sneaky. But I wanted to share this with her. And the thing is, I wanted to know 2 main things. I wanted to know, one, who this lovely person was who so totally captivated all of my thinking and all of my feeling. And I never felt like that. When we were in the hot tub, all the buzzers and whistles and bells were going off, and I knew that something was going on and I should pay attention. So, and I wanted to find out, second thing I wanted to find out was, with this euphoria that we were both feeling, was this going to last, or was there any way to prolong it? So I had a pretty good idea, based on everything that we'd found out about each other previously, I had an idea of what to expect when I took her through this process, but I wanted to know for absolute sure. Now, I too had recently decided that I was tired of superficial relationships, casual relationships, and marriages that weren't working in the way that I thought loving relationships should be. So then I wanted to have a more meaningful and a more substantial relationship. And at the same time, I was feeling an urge from Spirit that it was time to make a change, that it was time to settle down. And I really felt that a life change was in the making, so I really wanted to pay attention. Well, this process that I was getting ready to share with Kaye involved three things. One, naming her top 20 values. Two, writing a sentence or two for each one of those values so that she and I would both know what she meant when she was referring to her values. And finally, to put them all together in a hierarchical order of importance. Now, for all you Virgos out there, and really into details, this process is for you. You would love it. But I'm sure that you can see the benefits of knowing this information if you're getting ready to start a relationship, be it business or personal. Well, I have Virgo rising, and Kaye has 3 planets in Virgo, so we went through this process. Let's say that we were very thorough. But I didn't influence her in any way as she went through the process, because this is a total self-discovery process, and it's important that a person come to their realizations on their own. Where are we? Thank you. Okay, so this is, like I said, it's a total self-discovery process. And like I said, we were thorough, and even though it took us 8 full hours to complete this, she was astounded with the results, as was I, because now I could hardly wait for what was coming next. Finally, after all this, I revealed my motives for walking her through this process, because I wanted to compare our lists. And I wanted to see if this relationship was worth exploring any further. Well, as it turns out, our lists were virtually identical, with only 1 or 2 of our values and a different priority. And so I figured that gave us about a 98% compatibility ratio. And so I thought that was going to really work for our relationship. Now, I was already convinced that we were brought together by Spirit, but here was the physical proof that I needed. And I would have never guessed that we had so much in common and on such deep levels. Now, Kaye was very surprised to find out about my little relationship test, but she saw the wisdom in the whole process. So we dove into our relationship with a great sense of confidence for our future. A year later, we went to Hawaii to staff a seminar for Tony Robbins. And we were there a whole month, and so we got to bask in the aloha spirit. And it was in that spirit that I asked Kaye to marry me. Well, the universe and Spirit conspired, along with the Marriott Hotel, to give us the most wonderful wedding. We were married on the beach in Maui at 6 a.m. in the morning with 6 of our closest friends from all over the United States. And we had this very precious minister named Bob Hope. And at the moment, and we had this incredible rainbow at the very moment when we both said, I do. It was breathtaking and spectacular, and just everybody was, oh. So we felt like we were in a dream and that we were experiencing heaven on earth. Well, the honeymoon's still on. And later on, we returned to the mainland. And after we were married a short time, a few months, we decided to take our relationship to a new level. And we decided to create our we values list. Fortunately for us, though, since our lists were so compatible and so close, it was a relatively easy process. And it really helped us in being able to make decisions as a couple. So because we took so much time and effort early on in our relationship to lay the groundwork, we formed a pretty solid foundation from which to grow our spiritual ideals and our values. Now together, we've been through just about everything that you can experience in a relationship, save the passing of a spouse. We've experienced the death of 2 of our children, one mine and one Kaye's, 3 of our parents, and many of our friends. We've had financial crisis and illness. And in the beginning, we were nearly homeless for 3 months. But these things were also a part of our spiritual transformation. And by not judging these things as good or bad, it helped us develop a deeper sense of compassion for ourselves and for everyone else. The pain we sometimes endured paled in comparison to all the amazing experiences and discoveries that Kaye and I had together living a spiritual life. We love spending time together in nature. We love meditating. We've written a book together. We talk each morning before we start our day. We love learning in group experiences, improving our health and well-being, and do our best to be of service and use our abilities and to be of service to the world around us. We consider our lives to be mystical, and having someone who loves us unconditionally, a best friend with whom we love being around, the perfect business partner, and someone who respects our sacred space, well, that's the icing on the cake. And we've often remarked that with all that we've experienced, we feel like that we've lived 10 lifetimes in this one relationship alone.
Go find me.
Pages.
Sometimes when I talk with a client about relationship and how we can create what we want through intention, they're like, well, that just happened with you guys. But it's really not true. I mean, when you look at our history and how we changed our pattern of relationship, I really feel that all of us can do this. We all have different values, so Larry and I might drive someone else, and probably did, crazy. But we can all have this. Anyway, little did I know 27 years ago, when I made the decision to become my own soulmate, that I would soon meet and marry the literal man of my dreams, someone I am compatible with on all of the important levels. Entering into a consciously, unconditionally loving relationship based on common values, an intention to live out the power of love instead of the love of power. I say that because we met on Plutonian aspects, so it's the power of love or the love of power, has been the best decision of our lives. As we've stayed the course, we've watched our relationship blossom and overflow in our connections with all the other people in our lives, healing more in all of our relationships than we ever dreamed possible. Before ending the talk today, I would like to pass along some things we learned along the way, but before I go into that, please know that in no way do Larry and I think we've have everything all figured out, because we don't. We just know if we handle the stuff that comes up in a loving way, in a spiritual way, with sweet energy and unconditional love for ourselves and each other, odds are that things will work out. And no, we don't always work it out in the moment, but striving for that ideal helps us to abide in awareness a greater portion of the time. Here's some of what we learned. I know we're probably leaving out important stuff, but we're preaching to the choir with all of this anyway. And so, because we're not saying a thing that you don't already know and practice in this sweet church that we love so much. Here it goes. 1, it is not enough to desire a good relationship or a great relationship. My beloved Casey quote is, "The best dream is one applied." You might have heard me say that before. It's just my favorite. Relationships are really important, so make them important. Blame frames and judging each other doesn't serve any loving purpose. 100% self-responsibility is where it's at. We're responsible for ourselves, our perspectives, our experiences, and our choices. Gratitude, love, forgiveness, and humility work, and they have to be worked. Humility is not a sense of worthlessness. It is ability to surrender, to consider other perspectives, to be flexible and forgiving of ourselves and others, to remember our source, because this opens the door to the love that we are and are grateful for. Gratitude is the gateway to humility, and so it goes. 4, within every challenge or issue, the root solution to it lies within our connection to our divine source. Whenever Larry and I have we call them squabbles. Even if they're intense, we call them squabbles. So it sort of lightens the energy. We realize that when we get back to our connection with our divine source, that's when we can really start to deal with what's going on. An altar placed in the center of our home reminds us of our connection to our divinity, and it's a place of refuge, a sanctuary from the pain that being human sometimes brings. We all experience pain, but as Buddha said, suffering is optional. We like it that we can go to our altar to remember what is real. We went there this morning and prayed that our divinity would come through us today, and that hopefully our egos could step out of the way. 6, moods change. Everything is energy. Change the energy and the problems and issues become easy to resolve. 7, diet and nutrition affect our attitudes and well-being too. And we found a good cleanse will lighten things up, not only in the body, but in our attitudes in the home as well. It's all connected inside. And 8, being of service to the divine source in both ourselves and others brings us to bask in the unconditional love, or the living love, that brings heaven to earth. In this way, we make attempts to apply our best dreams. These are the things that make up the best of spiritually transformative relationships, in our humble opinions. And thank you for letting us speak, and we love you all.